Chief Bartholomew, Bad Bart, Johnson eased his battered pickup into the final parking spot at Bayview Marina, the late evening breeze carrying the briny scent of the harbor. He had just wrapped up a demanding week at the police department and was eager to spend a few hours fishing from his beloved yacht, the Intimidator. As the retired officer climbed out of his truck, he savored the quiet hush of the docks. Few people dared the water at this hour. His boots clicked against the wooden planks as he made his way toward the slip where the Intimidator bobbed gently. The boat's sleek black hull gleamed under the overhead lamp, a comforting sight that reminded Bart of simpler times spent at sea. He fished his keys from his jacket pocket, admiring the weight of them, sturdy, reliable, each one bearing a small emblem of his former badge. Just as he reached the railing, a sharp voice shattered the calm. "Hey, you!" Bart spun around to see Karen striding toward him, her posture bristling with entitlement. Clad in a floral sundress and oversized sunglasses, even at night, she waved a set of keys aloft. Beside her stood a young officer, Officer Hale, looking uncomfortably torn between duty and embarrassment. Bart's eyes narrowed. "Good evening," he said evenly. "Can I help you?" He recognized Karen from the neighborhood, an HOA member known for her penchant for officious complaints. What he did not expect was her presence at his private slip. Karen crossed her arms, pressing the keys against her hip. "Those are my spare keys," she declared, her tone brooking no contradiction. "I was given them by the previous owner for emergencies. Hand them over." Her gaze swept the marina as though she expected applause for her authority. Bart felt a surge of irritation. "Excuse me," he replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "This is my yacht. I own the Intimidator. I've had these keys for 2 years. Since the day I bought the boat." Karen's lips twisted in a scowl. "That's what he told me," she sneered, pointing to the young officer. "But I'm telling you now, you don't belong here. I need those keys." The officer looked away, avoiding eye contact with Bart, as if hoping the situation would resolve itself. Bart took a measured step forward. "Let's be clear," he said firmly. "Those keys are mine. I have the title, the purchase agreement, everything. You have no legal claim to them." He unclipped the small badge he still carried as a memento of his service, letting it catch the lamplight. "I was a police chief," he added quietly. "I know my rights. Now please step back." Karen's expression flickered, a momentary hesitation. Yet she recovered quickly, her voice rising. "I'll call security," she threatened. "Or the police." The irony was not lost on Bart. She was already standing next to an officer, but she seemed desperate to involve anyone else. Bart raised an eyebrow. "You're standing right next to one," he said, nodding at Officer Hale. The officer cleared his throat awkwardly, his eyes shifting between Bart and Karen. "Perhaps we can resolve this amicably," he ventured. Karen glared at the officer, then back at Bart. "I'm not leaving without those keys," she insisted. "You're making a big mistake." Bart felt a flush of anger but forced himself to remain composed. He knew that any sign of aggression could escalate the situation. Instead, he decided to document her claim. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "For the record," he said, "this is a private vessel. These keys belong to me." Karen's face paled as the red recording light glowed. She glanced at Officer Hale, as if seeking an ally, but found only reluctance. Moments later, Bart pocketed his phone and offered her one last chance. "I suggest you walk away now," he said. "Because if this goes any further, I will press charges." Without another word, Karen snatched the keys from the officer's hand, an act of defiance, and stormed off toward the parking lot. Officer Hale stood frozen for a moment, then turned to Bart. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, regret coloring his voice. Bart nodded, watching Karen's retreating figure. "I'm fine," he replied. "But it's a good thing I was prepared." He pocketed his phone, took a deep breath, and finally turned back to the Intimidator. The night's serenity had been shattered, but he was determined not to let Karen's antics ruin his fishing trip, or his hard-won peace. The next morning, Chief Bartholomew "Bad Bart" Johnson planned to enjoy a peaceful sunrise at Bayview Marina, hoping to get an early start on fishing aboard the Intimidator. But as he walked down the dock, coffee in hand, he spotted Karen lurking dangerously close to his boat. It was unusual to see her up at this hour, and even more peculiar to notice she was fiddling with a small ring of keys. From a distance, Bart recognized the distinct shape of the Intimidator's key, an extra copy he always kept under lock and key. Alarm coursed through him. How in the world had Karen gotten hold of it? Quickening his pace, Bart approached, careful not to startle her, though it was hard to hide his concern. "Karen," he called out calmly. She spun around, startled, keys clutched tight in her fist. A moment later, Officer Hale, standing a few feet away, took a step forward, as though ready to intervene if things escalated. Bart's heart sank. Once again, Karen had managed to involve law enforcement in something that should have been personal property rights. "Chief Johnson," Karen said with forced sweetness, "I was just admiring these keys. They were lying around." She lifted them with a theatrical flourish, ignoring the fact that Bart could see them partially detached from the ring. "You know," she continued, voice turning smug, "someone might have stolen them if I hadn't come along." Bart squared his shoulders, recalling last night's close call when she tried to claim ownership of the Intimidator. "Why are they in your hand?" he asked. "And how did you get them off the ring?" Officer Hale shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking from Karen to Bart. He looked uncertain, as though he wasn't fully convinced by Karen's story but also didn't want to contradict her outright. Karen shook her head dismissively. "They weren't attached properly. I thought maybe I'd turn them in to Marina Security." She gestured vaguely toward the office area. Bart noted that no security staff ever patrolled at dawn. It was clear she was making things up as she went along. His frustration swelled. "Please give me my keys," he said, voice controlled. "You know this is my boat, and you have no right to them." He offered a polite but firm hand for her to relinquish them. Yet Karen seemed in no hurry to comply. Her expression grew defiant, as if she'd decided to bait him further. At that moment, Officer Hale cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen, "maybe it's best if you let him have the keys back. If Chief Johnson says they're his," he let the sentence dangle, hoping Karen might see reason. But Karen only tightened her grip on the ring. With tension crackling in the salty marina air, Bart realized this was just the beginning of another standoff. In her eyes, he saw the same arrogance that led her to the boat in the first place, determined to challenge him at every turn. And so the morning, once destined for a tranquil fishing excursion, veered sharply off course, forging yet another confrontation that threatened to overshadow Bart's claim to the yacht he rightfully owned. Sergeant Victor "Iron Vic" Novak had nearly finished prepping his beloved yacht, Poseidon's Pride, at Windward Marina. The early morning light cast a gilded sheen over the water, and Vic felt that familiar surge of excitement for a day out at sea, fishing gear ready. Yet, as he stepped onto the dock, he noticed a figure hunched near his boat's bow, Karen, wearing a wide-brim hat and carrying a suspicious set of keys. His stomach tightened. The prior day's run-in left him wary. Karen had already proven her willingness to challenge Vic's property rights. This time, she seemed intent on tampering with the small set of keys that opened the cabin's secure compartments. Vic quickened his pace, quietly calling out, "Karen, what are you doing?" She spun around, eyes widening. Though startled, she quickly rearranged her features into feigned innocence. In her right hand dangled the key ring for Poseidon's Pride, with one key partially detached. Vic's chest tightened. He recognized that key ring intimately, a battered old keepsake from his academy graduation. At that moment, Officer Yates approached from behind a stack of lobster traps. He wore a look of polite caution, as though uncertain how to interpret Karen's presence near Vic's boat. "Morning," Yates greeted, scanning the scene. Vic nodded in acknowledgement, focusing on Karen, who hadn't let go of the keys. Karen forced a laugh. "Oh, Sergeant Novak. I found these keys lying around, thought they might belong to someone." She tossed the half-detached key in the air, catching it precariously. "Figured I'd return them to security," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the marina's deserted office area. Vic's eyebrows rose. "There's no security on shift at dawn," he countered. "And you seem to know exactly whose keys they are. Why try to detach them?" Karen shrugged, an unconvincing smile plastered across her face. "I was just making sure they worked," she said. "You know, so I could confirm they were yours." Her story sounded contrived, each sentence laced with condescension, as if daring him to call her bluff. Meanwhile, Officer Yates, shifting uncomfortably, realized the tension underlying this exchange. Exhaling slowly, Vic stepped closer, trying to remain calm. "Those are my personal keys," he said firmly. "I'd appreciate having them back, intact." He lifted a hand to retrieve them, but Karen held tight. Officer Yates interjected softly, "Maybe we can verify the ownership without trouble, ma'am." "If Sergeant Novak says the keys belong to him," he let the words trail off, hoping Karen might back down. Instead, she bristled, hugging the key ring against her chest. "I'm not done here," she hissed. Vic's frustration flared. He recognized that this was no honest confusion, Karen was staging another confrontation. A wave of disappointment washed over him. Instead of a day on open water, he was saddled with an interloper intent on stirring conflict. "Officer Yates," he said, glancing at the policeman, "I have the boat's title, registration, anything you need. Let's sort this." Yet Karen clung to her narrative, ignoring reason. The moment thickened with discomfort, underlined by the lapping of the marina waters against the hull. Vic recognized that her boldness might soon escalate into further baseless accusations. He steeled himself, recalling the departmental codes that guaranteed a citizen's property rights. If she pressed further, he was prepared to respond, legally and calmly. For now, though, the only action required was a steeled resolve, as he awaited her next move, refusing to let her sabotage the life he'd built. Lance Riley had risen before dawn, intending to finalize his tackle setup aboard his beloved yacht, Triton's Glory, docked at Compass Marina. A low fog drifted across the water, and Lance inhaled the crisp air, thankful for the day's promise. That peace evaporated as soon as he noticed Karen on the boat's stern ladder, fiddling with a ring of keys. His pulse quickened, he recognized those keys. The small anchor-shaped fob was unique, a gift from a friend. Over the prior week, Lance had endured repeated run-ins with Karen, who wrongly accused him of community standards violations. Now she was messing with his boat's keys. The confusion turned to dismay when he realized the ring was half undone, a key partially detached. "Karen," Lance began, voice controlled. "Those are my keys. I'd like them back." She barely looked up. Instead, she clutched the ring tighter, an odd glint in her eye. "I don't have to listen to you," she shot back. "You're not the boss of this dock." Her defiance escalated swiftly. Deputy Marsh, a local policeman, suddenly emerged from behind a nearby post. Lance felt a momentary relief, hoping the officer might help retrieve his property. But Karen spoke first, spinning a dramatic tale of how she'd found lost keys, and that Lance was harassing her for them. The deputy, uncertain whose story to trust, asked for an explanation. Lance explained calmly that it was his own boat, these were his own keys, and Karen had no business with them. Yet Karen refused to hand them over. Tension crackled in the early morning hush. The gulls, perched on nearby pylons, squawked as if sensing the conflict. Lance took a step forward, hoping to forcibly retrieve the keys if necessary, though mindful that aggression might fuel her next move. Sure enough, Karen scowled and pulled out her phone. With a pointed glare, she tapped 911, pressing the speaker so the call's beep echoed over the water. "Hello, emergency. "I'm at Compass Marina," she stated, voice trembling with theatrical distress. "There's a large man threatening me, trying to steal my purse." Her phrase rang false. Lance wasn't even near her bag, let alone touching it. Deputy Marsh's eyebrows shot up in mild shock, but Karen continued, weaving a story that painted her as the victim of a looming threat. Lance's frustration burned. He glanced at the deputy, silently pleading for him to step in and correct the record. But Marsh only stammered, "Ma'am, are you sure?" before Karen hissed at him to be silent. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher's voice crackled, requesting specifics about the alleged attack. Karen insisted, "He's towering over me," though she conveniently omitted that Lance was standing at least 5 feet away, arms folded, posture resolutely calm. She ended the call abruptly, snapping the phone shut. An uneasy hush fell. She glared at Lance. "We'll see how tough you are when backup arrives," she spat, brandishing the boat keys as if they were trophies. Deputy Marsh, torn by the conflicting accounts, hovered uncertainly. "Maybe we should wait for additional officers," he murmured. "We need to clarify who owns what." Lance exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to rip the keys from Karen's grip. Instead, he pulled out his own phone. "I'm going to record this for my own safety," he informed them, flipping to the camera. The lens captured Karen's scowl, the battered keys in her hand. "Ma'am," he said, letting his words be recorded, "I'm asking you politely, return my property." Karen's face twitched. The moment was thick with tension, the water lapping at the hull of Triton's Glory. Lance's heart pounded, aware that the arrival of more officers, already skewed by her lies, could spell trouble if they believed her version of events. Still, he had to stand his ground. The keys were his, the yacht was his, and no amount of false drama would change that. Deputy Marsh, at last, found his voice. "Look, Miss Karen," he said. "If these keys are indeed Mr. Riley's, you must hand them over. We can confirm ownership through the marina's records." The suggestion hung in the air, rational but overshadowed by Karen's stubborn refusal. She turned away, keys rattling in her grip. "I'll do no such thing until real police arrive," she declared, ignoring Marsh's uniform. Her illusions of authority stood on shaky ground, yet she clung to them with a fervor that perplexed even the deputy. As dawn gave way to soft daylight, Lance realized the confrontation was far from over. The 911 call had been placed, and an officer was presumably en route with partial, misleading details. The best Lance could do was maintain composure, record everything, and prepare to show proof of ownership once more. Triton's Glory deserved better than to be the stage for such a petty drama, but it seemed fate had other plans. With a last, steadying breath, Lance braced for the imminent arrival of more law enforcement, and the fresh wave of tension that would likely follow. Quinton Q. Sanders had sensed from the beginning that Karen's meddling would escalate. But he never dreamed she'd go so far as to call 911 with a blatantly false accusation. Standing on the weather-worn boards of Harborview Pier, he watched in disbelief as Karen pressed her phone to her ear, reciting a panicked story that painted Q as a menacing figure determined to steal her purse. Only moments earlier, Q had politely insisted she relinquish his yacht keys, the ring clearly labeled with a small anchor charm that matched the name of his prized boat, Seawind Fury. He'd caught her rummaging through them, detached from the chain that usually lived in his duffel bag. Now, with the sea breeze tugging at her hair, Karen defied logic, brandishing those very keys like a victory token and gesturing wildly for emphasis as she shouted into the phone. "Officer, there's a large man here," she gasped, putting on a shaky voice that Q recognized as performance. "He's threatening me, trying to steal my belongings." The fact that they were both near Q's boat seemed lost on her, or perhaps she knew precisely what she was doing, attempting to frame him in the worst possible light. Officer Rios, stationed a few yards away, looked torn. His posture suggested unease about the direction things were taking. Even though Rios had come along apparently due to Karen's earlier request, he hadn't expected her to dial 911. Q approached, arms raised in a calming gesture. Ma'am, he said evenly, I don't want your purse. I want my keys. You have them, and you know it. Karen ignored him, continuing her frantic monologue for the dispatcher. He's glaring at me, refusing to back away. I'm so scared. Please send help immediately. She ended the call with a dramatic flourish, pocketing her phone. Then she turned to face Q, eyes alight with a twisted sort of glee, as if confident she'd outmaneuvered him. The gulls circling overhead screeched, as though echoing Q's internal turmoil. He felt a wave of anger threatening to surge but held it at bay. Experience taught him that such confrontations could become volatile if he reacted with equal aggression. Instead, he drew on the disciplined composure he'd developed through years of traveling as a marine engineer. Problem-solving calmly amid high-stress conditions was second nature. Officer Rios cleared his throat. Look, he said quietly, I'm not sure this is how we should handle the situation, Ms. Karen. Perhaps we can verify who truly owns these keys. Karen cut him off, her voice dripping scorn. Verify? Isn't it obvious? The boat might not even be his. He could be using stolen papers. Don't let him fool you. She held on to the keys, refusing to yield an inch. Q stifled a groan. The registration for Seawind Fury is in my vehicle, along with all relevant paperwork, he informed both of them. And the marina records also list me as the sole owner. We can check them at the harbor master's office. But those records might not matter if you're determined to ignore reason. Karen narrowed her eyes, jabbing a finger in his direction. You think I'm going to believe anything you say? The real police are on their way, anyway. We'll see who's telling the truth. She took a step back, the keys jangling in her grip, and cast a quick glance at the approaching lights in the distance. The swirl of red and blue danced across the water, heralding the arrival of additional officers responding to her 911 call. A hush settled over the pier, broken only by the lapping waves and the faint chatter of a few early fishermen who had paused to watch the scene unfold. Q inhaled steadily. He knew that in a matter of minutes, he'd have to present his side to an officer who might arrive believing Karen's frantic version. But he also had confidence in the validity of his documentation, and in the fact that her story was built on contrived panic. Even as tension coiled in his stomach, Q stood tall, phone in hand, quietly recording each second. If more officers tried to forcibly side with Karen, he'd have proof of the entire fiasco. For now, though, he merely tightened his hold on the phone, ready for the final showdown that loomed under the marina's flickering lamp posts. The quiet hush of the water seemed to mirror the calm he was forcing upon himself, steeling him for the moment the newly arrived officers stepped onto Harborview Pier to judge who was indeed the rightful owner. And who was weaving a web of deceit. Remy Cook stood at the edge of Lakeside Dock, heart thumping as he watched Karen pace near his boat, the shore runner, clutching his keys. Only minutes earlier, Officer Weston had arrived, responding to Karen's frantic 911 call. Now, the tension in the air felt as thick as the morning fog rolling in off the water. Karen maintained her tight grip on the keyring, her phone in the other hand as though poised to record any move Remy might make. She insisted that Remy posed a threat, her voice carrying a mix of self-righteous confidence and prejudice. For his part, Remy tried to stay composed, explaining that the boat was his, that the keys were his property, and that Karen's entire narrative was a fabrication. But Officer Weston showed hesitation, uncertain whether to side with Remy or heed Karen's dramatic claims. A flicker of relief coursed through Remy when he saw John Cook, his older brother and a decorated military veteran, jog down the dock. Clad in casual shorts and a t-shirt, John exuded a quiet authority that often made people pause. "Everything all right, little brother?" John asked, voice tinged with concern. Remy exhaled slowly. "Not exactly," he replied, pointing at Karen's clenched fist around the keys. "She's saying I'm trespassing or worse. These are my keys, my boat, she won't let go." John nodded, stepping forward with a calm confidence. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen politely, "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you, Karen glared, her posture stiffening. "You don't scare me," she spat, noticing John's imposing frame. Yet a flicker of unease passed over her face. There was a resolute steadiness in John's gaze that hinted he wouldn't be manipulated. Officer Weston cleared his throat, attempting to reassert control of the situation. "Let's keep this civil," he said, directing his words to both men but flicking a glance at Karen as well. "We have a report of potential theft and threats." John's lips tightened. "Threats?" he echoed, scanning the scene. "Look around, officer. My brother's just standing here, asking for his property back." "Where's the threat?" Karen interjected with a shrill note. "He's bigger than me, and he advanced on me. I felt unsafe." She gestured with the keys, rattling them as if they were evidence of her victimhood. But the arrival of a second figure, John, who carried an air of discipline and experience, seemed to erode Karen's bluster. Remy seized the moment, taking a step closer to Officer Weston. "May I show you my boat registration?" he offered, producing a folded set of documents from his jacket pocket. "This has my name, the slip number, everything verifying I'm the owner." The officer hesitated before taking the papers, scanning them briefly. The official letterhead and stamps lent undeniable credibility. Karen huffed, refusing to relinquish the keys. She aimed her phone's camera at John, as if searching for a moment she could twist into a violent confrontation. But John remained calm, shoulders relaxed, arms at his sides. "Ma'am," he said, voice measured, "I'm a serviceman, and I've dealt with real threats. My brother here is no threat to you. Let him have his keys." Her eyes darted between John and Remy. Officer Weston completed his cursory check of the registration, exhaling a ragged sigh. "This all seems to confirm Mr. Cook's claim," he admitted quietly. "Ma'am, you need to hand over the keys or risk charges of theft or obstruction." Karen's defiance flickered. She looked at the officer, then at John's unwavering stance. Slowly, she loosened her grip. When she finally dropped the keys into Remy's palm, tension leaked out of the scene like air from a deflated balloon. Remy clutched them, relieved yet still wary. Karen gave them both one last venomous glare. "This isn't over," she muttered, stepping back. She stuffed her phone in her purse, pivoting on her heel as though to walk away. Officer Weston, glancing at Remy, seemed to realize the thinness of Karen's claims. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'll note that the report of threatened theft might have been unfounded." He paused, uncertain how to smooth over the awkwardness. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," he added, though the apology felt hesitant. John placed a reassuring hand on Remy's shoulder. "At least we've resolved this for now." But Remy sensed that Karen's vow that, "this isn't over," carried weight. She might attempt further sabotage or even a new complaint. Still, for the moment, the confrontation had been defused, with the rightful keys back in their owner's possession. The gulls overhead resumed their circling cries, and small waves lapped against the pier supports. Remy exhaled, grateful for his brother's timely arrival and the officer's grudging acknowledgement of the facts. As Karen strode away, posture rigid, Remy wondered how far her entitlement would push her next time. But at least now, he had proof that methodical calm, plus a bit of brotherly backup, could counter her attempts to sow chaos. He turned to Seawind Fury, boat keys secure in hand, determined to salvage the rest of the day, and mindful that the real test might still lie ahead. Gareth Bishop felt a tangled mix of anger and relief when he saw his older brother, Devon Bishop, stride onto the docks at Bayshore moorings. The faint hum of outboard motors and the briny smell of the bay reminded Gareth of simpler days sailing with his dad. But this moment was far from leisurely. He'd been locked in a tense standoff with Karen, who clutched his boat keys while spouting false claims, and Officer Harlow, who seemed uncertain whom to believe. Devon's imposing frame, honed by years in the military, carried him swiftly across the pier. Though clad in casual clothes, he radiated an air of quiet authority. Karen's bravado wavered slightly at his approach. She'd been filming Gareth with her phone, insisting he was trespassing on her slip. Now she shifted her camera to Devon, as if hoping to catch a glimmer of aggression she could use to her advantage. "Everything okay, G?" Devon asked, stopping next to Gareth. "I got here as fast as I could." Gareth exhaled, grateful for the backup. He silently handed Devon the folded boat registration. "Karen claims these keys, my keys, are hers. Officer Harlow's trying to figure out what's what." He gestured toward the policeman, who looked visibly relieved to see someone else step in. Karen sneered, tapping her phone. "I'm capturing all of this. If you threaten me," she left the sentence hanging as if to imply Devon might lash out any second. But Devon merely frowned. "Threaten you?" he echoed. "We only want the truth. My brother owns this boat. Those keys belong to him." He kept his voice level, refusing to play into her attempts at provocation. Officer Harlow shifted uncomfortably. "I just want to ensure nobody's property is stolen," he said, scanning the boat's stern, where the name Cresting Dawn was emblazoned. Ms. Karen reported suspicious activity. She indicated Mr. Bishop was, harassing her. The policeman's gaze flicked between Gareth and Karen. Devon stepped in. "Officer, have you seen the deed, the slip rental agreement, or the boat registration in Gareth's name?" Harlow hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, he has documents. They seem legitimate, but Ms. Karen insists she has some ownership or at least permission." He trailed off, uncertain how to articulate her claims that made little sense. Devon studied Karen, who refused to meet his eye. "If she had any proof, she'd show it," he said quietly. "But it's just her word." He then turned to Harlow. "Let's call this what it is, prejudice. She's singled out my brother, tried to brand him a threat. I can't see any motive beyond bigotry." Harlow's posture stiffened, an uneasy expression crossing his face. "I can't confirm prejudice, sir, but I'm trying to remain neutral here." Gareth felt the emotional weight of the conversation, an officer straining to balance an uncooperative neighbor's false allegations against an actual homeowner's documented proof. The entire fiasco hinged on whether Harlow would accept Gareth's evidence over Karen's noise. Karen, sensing the shift, clutched the keys more tightly, voice snapping like a whip, "I don't care who he is or who you are. I have every right to be here." But even as she spoke, her confidence eroded. She shot anxious glances at the passers-by who had gathered to watch. Some recognized Gareth, waving in silent support. Devon folded his arms, the air around him charged with a protective energy. "Officer Harlow, I must ask. On what grounds can Karen claim these keys as hers? She hasn't produced a single shred of ownership paperwork or any legitimate reason." Harlow glanced at Karen, but she merely lifted her chin defiantly, offering no explanation. The policeman nodded slowly. "That is a fair question," he admitted. "Without evidence on her part, I can't in good faith side with her." A flicker of triumph crossed Gareth's mind. He stepped forward, addressing Harlow softly, "I'm prepared to show you the slip agreement in detail, as well as transaction receipts for these keys." He indicated the ring in Karen's grasp. "I just want them back. This situation has escalated needlessly." Karen's phone beeped, indicating a low battery. She faltered, the camera's screen going dark, robbing her of a potent intimidation tool. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsettled. She glared at Gareth with a mixture of anger and frustration, seemingly unsure how to maintain her narrative without the crutch of recorded drama. Devon placed a steady hand on Gareth's shoulder. "Let's wrap this up," he said quietly to Harlow. "So my brother can get back to his life, and we can put an end to these false claims." The officer nodded. Even he appeared tired of Karen's theatrics. As if sensing her last stand slipping away, Karen let out a furious sigh. "This isn't over," she snapped. Yet her bravado rang hollow. The watchers along the docks had seen enough to draw their own conclusions. With a final glare, Karen thrust the keyring at Harlow, refusing to return it directly to Gareth. The policeman accepted it gingerly, stepping closer to Gareth. "Mr. Bishop, your keys," he said, handing them over. Tension bled from Gareth's posture as the ring settled in his palm. Karen's menacing presence felt less formidable now, overshadowed by the quiet solidarity of bystanders and the unwavering support of Devon. Though the confrontation had ended, the bruise of her false claims lingered, a reminder that bigotry could swirl up in the most ordinary of settings. For now, though, Gareth let out a breath of relief, grateful to have the tangible sign of ownership, the battered ring of keys, back where it belonged. He turned to Devon, nodding in thanks. The path ahead might hold more friction if Karen refused to move on, but at least for this day, they'd won a critical round in a fight they never asked for. Chief Don Price had reached his boiling point when Karen tightened her grip on the keys to the Sea Eagle, refusing to budge. She had called 911, weaving a tale of victimhood that painted him as an aggressor. Yet Don, retired from the force only to step into a new role as a local police chief, knew exactly how to handle false accusations. He decided it was time to set the record straight. He pulled out his badge, stepping back just enough for Officer Wells, newly arrived on the scene, to see it. "I'm Chief Price," he said clearly, letting each syllable hang in the salty air over Sunset Dock. Karen's eyes widened. Whatever smug confidence she displayed moments earlier drained from her face, replaced by shock. Officer Wells blinked, uncertain how to proceed with this sudden revelation. "Chief Price," he echoed, stealing a glance at Don's credentials. "I didn't realize you were the new chief." The mention of rank immediately shattered the illusion Karen had tried to maintain, portraying him as some random trespasser rather than the rightful boat owner. Karen's grip on the keys faltered. She stared at Don, lips parted, struggling to form a retort. Before she could speak, Don confronted her. "You reported me for supposedly threatening you," he said, voice low but firm. "Is that because you truly felt in danger, or did you assume you could misuse the system to push your prejudice?" Her silence spoke volumes. A crowd of nearby fishermen, some of whom recognized Don from local events, began to gather. Their quiet murmurs underscored the tension. "Hey, Chief Price," one called, "need us to back you up." Don lifted a hand, signaling it was under control. He fixed his gaze on Karen. "Now, hand me my keys," he repeated, more as an order than a request. Realizing the jig was up, Karen thrust the keys forward, her face an angry flush. "Fine," she muttered. "But I'm not admitting to anything." Officer Wells retrieved them and discreetly handed them to Don, acknowledging the rightful owner. With that, Karen's final grip on her false narrative dissolved. The fishermen, relieved by the outcome, broke into quiet cheers. One whistled, another clapped Don on the back. The oppressive vibe lifted, replaced by a hum of local camaraderie. Meanwhile, Karen tried to slink away, phone in hand, but Wells stopped her. "Miss Karen," he said gravely, "we have evidence that your 911 call was a false report." She tried to protest, but the officer's stern look cut her short. Within minutes, a second patrol car arrived, and the ranking officer listened briefly to Wells's account. He dismissed Karen's protests, guiding her toward the waiting vehicle. Don exhaled a slow breath, the tension flooding out as he watched Karen's outraged face in the reflection of the squad car's window. Turning back to the fisherman, Don forced a small smile. "Now that's over," he said, pocketing the keys to the Sea Eagle, "maybe I can finally get some fishing in." The quiet chuckle that passed among them was all the confirmation he needed. Justice had been served, at least for this morning. And with Karen escorted off the dock, Don vowed to enjoy the rest of the day, free from the burden of her petty harassment. Commander Al Davis couldn't suppress a burst of relief as he watched Karen being guided, in handcuffs, toward the waiting squad car. After her fruitless 911 call alleging he'd threatened her, the responding officers, led by Officer Bridge, had swiftly reviewed AL's ownership papers for the Wave Runner and determined Karen's story to be baseless. The once smug sneer on her face had vanished, replaced by panic. All of this unfolded on the weathered planks of Mariner's Wharf, where just hours earlier, Al had hoped to prep for a simple fishing trip. Instead, he found himself entangled in Karen's fabricated claims. Her voice, once full of accusations about him trespassing, now took on a pleading tone as she insisted the officers had it all wrong. But they knew better. She'd pivoted her narrative multiple times, failing to produce any evidence to validate her scenario. Officer Bridge, maintaining a calm professionalism, escorted Karen to the cruiser. Another officer, a senior detective, presumably, examined the evidence Al provided, a phone video capturing Karen's refusal to hand over the keys, along with her dismissive remarks about people like him not belonging at the wharf. The detective's grim expression told Al that the case for false reporting was solid. Neighbors and fellow boat owners gathered around, some in stunned silence, others murmuring about how Karen had gone too far this time. A few folks recognized Commander Davis from his past service. They'd seen him keep the peace in more dire circumstances. That experience lent him a calm demeanor, even when confronted by bigotry on his doorstep. Karen, forcibly placed in the back seat of the patrol car, shot Al a final glare through the window. She mouthed words he couldn't hear, presumably continuing her protest. But the distant wail of seagulls and the clamor of watchers drowned it out. In that moment, Al felt no schadenfreude, only a sense of vindication that justice had caught up to her. For too long, she'd twisted small issues into grand accusations, apparently believing her lies would stand unchallenged. Officer Bridge approached Al with a respectful nod. "We'll file the paperwork for a false report," he said quietly. "You can follow up at the station if you need any further documentation." Al extended a hand, offering a steady handshake. "Thank you," he replied, voice thick with an odd mix of gratitude and exhaustion. "I appreciate you taking the time to see through her claims." As the cruiser pulled away, taking Karen with it, the tension on the wharf dissolved like morning mist under the sun. A handful of onlookers clapped politely, returning to their chores and errands with a renewed sense that the social order had been righted. Al exhaled, turning back to his boat, the Wave Runner, with a weary smile. At last, the path was clear for the fishing trip he'd meant to enjoy all along. The echo of Karen's shrill accusations faded, replaced by the steady lapping of waves against the pier, a far more welcome soundtrack for a peaceful day on the water. When the patrol car finally pulled away from Shoreline Landing, Chief Malcolm Mac Bryan let out a slow breath. The morning's skirmish with Karen was over. She had been taken into custody for filing a false report, her hollow protests drowned out by the applause of local fishermen who'd paused in their tasks to watch the drama unfold. In the aftermath, Mac stood by his boat, Sea Titan, the ring of keys restored to his pocket. A few of the fishermen sidled up, offering congratulatory grins. One clapped him on the shoulder, saying, "Glad to see justice served." Mac smiled back, nodding his thanks. He wasn't one to bask in others' misfortune, but Karen's brazen bigotry and willingness to distort the truth had tested his composure. Seeing her confronted by the reality of law enforcement felt like a small victory for fairness. Officer Quinn, who had arrived moments before Karen's arrest, approached Mac with a handshake. "Chief Bryan, I'm sorry you had to go through that," he offered, sincerity evident in his tone. "I promise, the department will follow up. We don't tolerate false accusations like hers." Mac appreciated the recognition, responding with a nod. He'd spent years serving as a special investigator in a neighboring county, only recently stepping into a quieter life at Shoreline Landing. This morning reminded him that prejudice lurked anywhere, even in peaceful communities by the sea. A salty breeze ruffled Mac's jacket as he thanked Officer Quinn and turned toward the Sea Titan. At last, the chaos receded into memory, replaced by the gentle lap of waves against the hull. The fishermen resumed their chores, stowing gear or chatting about the best fishing spots. The entire wharf felt lighter, as if a dark cloud had lifted. Mac climbed aboard the boat, exhaling slowly as he surveyed the deck. The rods, tackle, and cooler were prepped just the way he'd left them before Karen's intrusion. With the keys back in hand, he unlocked the cabin, stowing his jacket. A wave of relief washed over him, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time that morning. He cast off, guiding the Sea Titan out of its berth and into the open water. The roar of the engine cut through the final remnants of conflict, each churn of the propeller signifying a step away from the hostility Karen had brought. As the boat glided into the bay, the rising sun bathed the deck in golden light, offering a sense of renewed peace Mac sorely needed. In the quiet that followed, he reflected on the day's events. Karen's false claims and hateful insinuations could have escalated dangerously. But calm documentation, along with a fair-minded officer, had turned the tide. The community's spontaneous applause affirmed that not everyone was swayed by Karen's narrative. Mac felt proud of standing his ground, and grateful for the fishermen's solidarity. With the wide expanse of ocean before him, Chief Malcolm Mac Bryan gripped the helm and steered into open waters. The tension left behind, he focused on the promise of a well-earned fishing trip. If anything, the day's clash underscored how a single voice of prejudice couldn't overshadow a steadfast commitment to truth and respect. As the Sea Titan sliced through the gentle waves, Mac allowed himself a small, contented smile, the memory of Karen's arrest already drifting behind him in the boat's wake.